Hello, and welcome to another episode of Consultants Corner. In today's new era where collaboration and partnership is becoming more prevalent and important, it is our belief that an open narrative and sharing of ideas is vital. The industry possesses some exceptional operators, consultants, and contractors, and our aim is to bring greater insights into the thinking which can often lie hidden away. I'm Maxine Crow, your host, and I'm joined by Tracey Fairclough of TAF Catering Consultancy. Hi, Tracey.
Hi, Maxine.
It's great of you to join us on Consultants Corner. Finally, we've made it, because I remember we were supposed to do a session, weren't we? And
I know. I'm so sorry. It's just been a
no.
bit crazy recently. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I'm really pleased that you've managed to make it onto the show. So, Tracey, the way we run it, we're going to ask you a few questions so that the audience can learn a bit more about yourself and about your organisation. So, you're ready?
I am. Far away.
Okay. So, can you just briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your journey in the industry?
Okay. Hello, everyone who's tuning in. My name is Tracey Fairclough. I set up TAF basically 5 years ago on the 1st of November. Really, to think that I would have ended up with a career in food is something that, if you look back to my 20-something-year-old self when I was at Cardiff University doing a business degree, would have been beyond comprehension. Had there been career choices around food at school, I would have plumbed for them hands down. But what happened was I did a business degree at Cardiff. I basically meandered out of there into advertising, promotions and marketing. Stayed there very comfortably for 16 years, working on kind of big brands, advertising campaigns like Nike, Coca-Cola, many Unilever brands. And basically this is where it started getting bred into me that if you don't know the customer, that everything starts with the customer and ends with the customer. And if you don't know what the customer is about, then how on earth are you going to fill the need of the people that you're trying to sell to? So I had a fantastic 16 years working on some of the biggest brands on the planet. And then basically found myself pretty disillusioned and, really wanting something more. So I sat down, stepped away from my job, found myself in an office with a gentleman called Chris Sprague, who worked for Avenance and Elliot at the time. Chris. Yeah. And I was helping a friend out recruiting, and he was looking for a sales manager. And I ended up putting my CV his way and saying, look, it's different to what I've been doing. Would you take a chance on me? And he did. And I cut my teeth at Elior, which was a phenomenal experience. I even found myself going around the kitchens of Lloyd's of London under a fantastic chef called Hayden Groves, literally working out what a sous chef did compared to an exec chef, compared to a pastry chef, compared to all of these different fabulous roles that make up a kitchen team. I then was headhunted to go and work for a boutique caterer after a number of years called Artisan, and again rolled my sleeves up under a lady called Alison Frith, understanding now the dynamic of how a boutique caterer works, which is very different. Loved it. Loved the fact that I got into the nitty gritty of every single contract there. I worked really closely with the teams. I left after quite a few years, realizing I didn't want to be a one-trick pony and work for one caterer. Yeah. And I thought I was pretty good at listening to what clients wanted. So I ended up crossing into catering consultancy. Actually, Chris Shepherdson said that I would be quite a good newbie in an industry that was quite established. So I cut my teeth with Turpin Smell for a couple of years, and then realized actually there's a marketplace for someone like me who's probably a little bit more disruptive than those that were in the market already. It's quite established. And so I just thought, right, with my focus on customers, again, going back to starts with the customer, end with the customer, I thought, right, I'm going to set up TAF. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. It's not saying it's better, it's just different. And that's kind of what brought me to Taft Catering Consultancy, where I've worked on amazing projects. I started off working on one B&I fabulous law firm, and I now, through lockdown, have managed to work on group contracts. I do rebrands, I do catering tenders for schools, for hospitals, and also for big corporates.
So how have you found that you've been able to draw on your advertising experience of the past to now to support you with the delivering the customer experience?
I think for me, I just use the same philosophy. It's got to start with the people that you're feeding, the customers. And so whether you're doing a school or whether you're doing an established corporate workplace, it's really interesting because I'm now dealing with, and I've done so much engagement, stakeholder engagement pieces in the last year or so, where on the one hand, I work with a great big bank, one of the top banks, and basically engaging their head of talent, head of property, all their divisional heads, and asking them, what do food mean to you? And basically pulling a piece on that. To more recently, I've worked with 3 different schools. And when you speak to these guys, kids, they have no filters. They haven't learned to say what they think you want to hear them say. And so it's really interesting because I've kind of almost got the insights from Generation Alpha. So baby boomers, I hate to say this because I fall in the 50 plus category, but the baby boomers are exiting the marketplace, and they want to because they want this work-life balance, and they've done their time, so to speak. And so they want to step out. Then you've got the millennials, the Generation Zs, the Generation Ys, and then you've got the Generation Alpha, who are going to be stepping into the workplace in 5 years' time. Very differently, feel very differently about work, about food, about everything, culture. So I do just the way I speak, I think, is slightly different to the way other people maybe treat things. And I think go in, understand what they want, and then work back from there, rather than saying, this is what we do. What do you want from this shopping list?
Yeah, that's a good point. And what's quite interesting actually to see is in the next 5 years, what is the workplace going to look like, and how through food will clients actually retain the talent? That's going to be quite an interesting space.
I know it's already quite interesting because I speak to caterers all the time. I've literally got 50 contract caterers on my horizons, which forms part of my philosophy. You've got to work hard and graft hard. You can't just go on hearsay or what occasional snippets of information. For me, it's about going out there, engaging 50 caterers. They make my life so much easier. They tell me about the innovations, about how they're responding to challenges. And it's really encouraging. I know we've had tough times, but actually throughout the pandemic, when you reach out to so many different caterers and you find out actually there are success stories all along the way. There might be those that win the awards, but actually for all of those that win the awards, there are those that go unnoticed or under the radar, but for their individual clients are actually carving the way. And you've got the challenges now where, I've just been speaking to caterers this week and we've got them all basically saying, on the one hand, you've got corporates that have been quite lax in terms of encouraging people back to work. And then you've got others that are literally saying, no, we want 2,000 grads to come in this year. And actually we need to give them the benefit of workplace feeding, and it needs to form part of a benefit. And I think the biggest challenge actually for Maxine is that, and I know it's one of the questions, is that I think the hardest question I have, the hardest part of my job today, here and now, is actually having those conversations with clients, with corporates, and saying, right, it's not someone else's problem. This is staff feeding is a benefit. You want to give these people the benefit of food to perform better, to drive more sales of your product. So don't lean on the caterer and come down like a ton of bricks on the caterer, when actually you need to almost rethink the whole benefit system
Yeah.
and consider the worth of your employees.
Yeah, do you know, I remember years ago, we'll come on to the more questions in a moment, but just quickly, I remember years ago when I first started out in facilities, and the caterers that the clients that we had at that time, one of our roles, it was like 100% subsidized. It was, how do we get to nil subsidy? And that was the talking point and the trend for many, many years. And it feels like it's come full circle again now, where subsidies have started to be reintroduced. I mean, if you were a massive investment back, it's 100%, big tech companies subsidized, whereas for, say, the middle ground, it is starting to change.
I think nil subsidy is a bit naughty if corporates are expecting,
this is going back 20 years.
It's do you know what's really interesting as well, going back 20 years, when I first came into the industry, when I first worked for Elior, and they were the big five, pretty much, so Elior back then had, I think, 44 contracts, and I pretty much went around to most of them, and they all seemed to be below ground, no natural light coming in, hidden away in the depths of the city, which is where I focused on. And you look now, that in itself tells you about well-being, about benefits, about feeding. People need natural light, whether it's the cooks, the chefs, the people that are looking to get time out away from their desk. You need natural light. And you just think, actually, if corporates have rethought the physicality, then they need to start thinking now of the financials and not putting, I guess, the pressure. And it's the worst conversation to have with clients, and you're constantly having them. But actually, once you present to them the facts, we've gone through a really hard time. We've gone up to almost 12% inflation. That's really hard for any economy. And you just think, actually, our industry has taken a massive hit. So we need to now put back into it, I think, from a corporate.
And I think, absolutely. And I just think as a procurement specialist as well, those conversations are now a lot easier because, and we're more receptive to, because we're all feeling the impact of the economics. We're all feeling the impact of inflation. So that ripple, it's a lot easier to have that conversation now, and the client gets it, as opposed to 10, 15 years ago when it was just like, no, not entertaining. So that's Tracey, in your opinion, why is transparency crucial in today's industry?
I think transparency really is about just having genuine conversations with as a consultant. If you're not sitting down and having honest conversations with the caterer, you're not going to get the best out of the caterers. Similarly, if you're not having those conversations with the clients, in a collaborative approach, you're not going to, hiding bits. It's going to come out, and it's not going to give you the full benefit of coming up with the perfect solution, whatever that may be. And every single client's different. Every single caterer is different. And the chemistry between caterer and client is not going to benefit if you're not being fully transparent with one another. And I've just worked on a three site contract, some in London and some outside, and it's a case of 3 different caterers were involved, and it was a case of just pulling them together under one. And for me to come in with my independent eyes and say, right, okay, I'm coming in from outside and I can see this, and this. Okay, you go to the caterer and say, what are the circumstances for these? And they're really honest to you. And then if you feed back to the client, rather than hide them away or the caterer is really embarrassed, there's a reason for everything. You can then approach that with the client. And often that leads to the important conversations about, well, why has that happened? Well, the client's been changing things historically and adapting, which has stripped away the control the caterer has had over this particular site, meaning this is why the catering looks like this, when actually, if the caterer had been allowed to cascade all the great things that makes that caterer great, so the transparency is super important today, more so than ever.
Thank you. Can you share an instance where new thinking significantly impacted a project or decision?
Oh gosh, that's quite a hard one. I would probably say okay, ask the question again so I can rephrase it.
So can you share an instance where new thinking significantly impacted a project or decision?
Okay, so I've recently done this 3-site contract, and what occurred to me is that there was very little latest understanding about the customer. Comes back to the customer. And nobody knew what the customer wanted. Okay. And it was really important to get the catering right. And so we went in and basically said, right, we need to engage the customer directly, but not here, not on site. We've got 3 sites, not on site. It needs to be away. So where do they go? Where do they go that you don't want them to go, that we need to go and find them and ask them questions? And so each of the sites said, well, they go to this place and they go to this place and this place. So we then took to the road and we're actually doing this now for another nationwide client. And we basically, we did quick fire vox pops. I don't know whether you know what vox pops are.
No, do you want to explain that for the audience?
So vox pops is literally where you go out and you literally ask people on the street. It's like market research on the street. And it's about engaging people and saying, what do you like? Where do you like to go? How much are you prepared to pay? Why do you prefer to come here rather than go? And it's literally, in fact, we have T-shirts that have these questions all over them. And you ask people, why are they here? Why do they prefer to eat at these places? And then basically, they're almost giving you what you need to form the basis of a future solution. And actually it changed the course right the way down to the caterer was awarded the contract. We then went back to the vox pops and said, right, for this site, this was the feedback here, great, we'll change the menus. They changed the menus and sales are kind of up 30%. You know, it's the knock-on effect of listening to what the customer wants, giving the customer what they want, and then seeing the results is where, you know, I think I'm do things differently and maybe disrupt a little bit. But I definitely had the inkling that we need to engage the customer. The customer is different today than what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's more important now than ever.
Yeah. Do you know, it's quite interesting because we used to have clients where, just get on with it, and they weren't really interested in they just wanted to see the food on the table. They weren't interested in the nuts, what went on behind that. And I think now clients are more intelligent, more informed, more aware of the mental health well-being that has to go in through food. That's great, thank you for that insight. So how do you foster collaboration in your projects and teams?
Okay, so collaboration. So every client project is different. I like to think that my latest client project is always the one where I have evolved my understanding, my insights enough and better than the previous one, because you're only as good as the latest insights and the information and the engagement with caterers. And so we're at the stage where God, what was the question again? I totally forgot what you asked.
That's okay. How do you foster collaboration in your projects?
So collaboration. So rather than taking what I've done for my last project, it's a case of saying, what are the client's needs? And if the client, you know, is particularly concerned about, so I did a mobilization project in lockdown. So when the whole of the country had ground to a halt, it was my busiest year. It was definitely from a collaborative perspective. So beginning January 2021, we weren't allowed to leave our homes. I was working for an essential services provider. I was appointed to travel 6,000 miles, which is what I did. around the country, around 8 locations. I brought on 13 other specialists to help me do that. And those 13 ranged from mobilization manager, which we were talking about earlier, food safety expert, HR expert, branding expert, installation expert. And they weren't drawn from just within the industry. Now, I like to think that I've got a really eclectic mix, having come from the branding side of things. So I was able to draw on people that are kind of award-winning in their own rights and market leading in their own rights. And that's what I think makes an effective collaboration, is rather than you being restricted with maybe the resources that are around. If we looked in our industry, I'm not saying that they're not good people. I'm just saying they're probably not enough people to go around everybody. And so what I tend to do is reach out to people that I know are really well established and award-winning in their field. So within branding and marketing, within design and production. And when you're able to delegate in such a way, you can just give them a good brief, and you say you are responsible for food safety, each one of these 10 locations, so 8 locations, but 10 different facilities, staff, restaurant, cafe. You are responsible for food safety management systems, and whatever you need, you're responsible for that. And then equally, I go to the branding, my branding kind of expert, and just say, right, whatever happens, you are responsible for the overall look and the feel. And we all work together. Everyone is as good. We're only as good as the sum of our, parts. But then that differs to, different projects. So one of the best projects I've worked on was TAF had to come up with 22 different food concept designs for Expo 2020 in Dubai. And I had 6 weeks to pull it together. And so we had 8 different designers sitting down in their own kind of environments, Teams calls back then. So this was 2018. And literally pull together 22 different foods concept designs, a couple of trips over to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and then I think effective collaboration means transparency. It means the 3 things, I guess, that underpin TAF. You've got to listen. So you listen to your customer, you listen to your client. Don't just tell your client you need to do this, because it's a case of listening to what they actually want. Then it's collaborating with the caterer, the client, and your network, your specialist experts. And then it's so listening, collaborating, and then delivering a solution that's bespoke to the client's needs. If you don't do what the client has come to you for, then you'll have an unhappy client. And I've worked on 50 projects now and headed up 50 projects for TAF. And I think I'm super lucky that I have, some fans in the industry, and I have, I've worked hard for it, but I'm super grateful that I've got all these people that I can collaborate with.
And it's quite similar to when you're mobilizing the contracts for a building, and it's all those different types of services. You go into the subject matter experts for those services, so you can deliver the best solution for that client. So network is just absolutely critical when you're in a service industry. I love that. Okay, so now just some time for some insights from your role. So what's the most valuable lesson you've learned in your role as a consultant? There may be several, actually.
Yeah, there are. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I'd much rather I over-delivered and under-promise, because you've got a level of expectation, especially now. I think I've had to graft hard. You have to make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you're not going to know. When I first went into But anyone that's out there that's considering going into catering consultancy, you have to make mistakes. It's just the way it is, because if you don't make the mistakes, you're not going to know how to work your way out of the problem or the situation. But from my personal point of view, sometimes you I guess when you're on your own and you're the person whose initials are above the door, you have to bring in other people. And it's a case of doing the checks to make sure that whoever you're bringing in, they can do what they say they're going to do. And, you've got the references, you've got the checks to make sure that they will help you, because the right people can make your life so much easier. Equally, the wrong people can create extra workload for you. I think also it's just really important. It comes down to knowing your customer and knowing it's not a case of just taking something that you've done before, reworking it and then repackaging it for someone else, because every client's different, every customer profile is different, and every possible potential relationship that you're possibly going to be instrumental in either supporting between caterer and client is going to depend on the chemistry of the caterer and the client. So, I'd say just make sure that when you delegate, you've got the right resources in place. Get your mindset into it's worth grafting hard. It takes a lot to keep in touch with 50 caterers, but you know what? I produced a report this year and 20 non-clients bought that report, and it presented the market, and it's all about understanding what are the options out there. You might be, as a client, be told, these are the essentials, these are the 5 biggies you need to go to. But actually, from a chemistry point of view, they might be totally offbeat. They might not listen to you because of the people that are there. And actually, if you know that there are 50 caterers out there, that potentially there'll be several that could be the right formula or produce the right formula. The right fit.
That's great. We're going to go on to a couple of questions around sustainability now. So it'll be really interesting to hear your views on these ones. So in what ways has the focus on sustainability changed the landscape of the industry in recent years?
I think COVID really propelled it to the front of everyone's agenda, whether it's government, whether it's working back, it's going to be government and then corporates and then consumers. But I think it's phenomenal. It's the planet we live on. Sustainability, what is it? It's about sustaining human beings, fundamentally. And it's a case of, are you interested in what the future planet looks like for future generations? And I think, it's super important because, it's almost affects every one of those questions I said is really key. Who do you cater for? Well, you're going to have to cater for vegetarians, for vegans, flexitarians, all of those things. You can't it's not just like meat and 2 veg anymore. How you cater for them in terms of what are your CO2 emissions? And I think as we move forward, it's almost as though people are going to hate me for saying this, but it's almost as though you're taking a catering facility and putting a carbon currency to every single part of it, and literally almost saying this, you're going to have to. And like I said, everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but actually every single company in the world is going to have to do this at some point. And it's going to be saying, right, this is the service or this is the product you want, and this is the carbon footprint it creates. Is it worth that, really, for the future of the planet? And I think, what we feed or what corporates feed their people, it's almost going to be scaled right back in terms of, right, is it as being delivered as sustainably as it could be? And this is where AI comes into place. This is about getting around labor shortages. It's about, do you really need, you've got prep robotics, that basically take away heavy labor. Several years ago, I went to a show and I saw this, probably shouldn't mention the name of the brand, but I will. It's called Scrag. It was a scrambled egg product that was delivered in a countertop unit. And I thought that would take off, because what it does is it gets around labour, and it means that, you know, you could fairly healthily feed 50 people all wanting scrambled eggs first thing in the morning to grab and go back at their desks. And I'm still surprised. Yes, there are other players to the market, but it's thinking differently about how to be more sustainable in providing something without it costing a part of the planet to provide it. So I think it's going to become even more and more important.
It's quite interesting because some of the other interviews we've had, there's I mean, everyone agrees it's important, but also the different insights in terms of the type of innovation out there, the technology. I think overall still the human element is still tipping that's still the most important in terms of that customer experience.
It is, but we're depleted massively. We don't have enough people to feed the demand for what people in hospitality can deliver. And I think that's a big challenge. And I think to get around that as a short-term solution, we're going to need to support the people that are in catering with some pretty hefty investment in tech, because it's not a quick fix to suddenly, you know, I'm hearing left, right and center of caterers that basically needing, because the demand for on-site hospitality is so great, that companies are going outside, you know, and it's a case of, right, why they're going outside? Well, for a caterer in-house to actually respond to rising demand for hospitality, it's costing a huge amount in terms of relief or agency staff. And that makes your own running of the catering facility unsustainable. So in order to do that, I think, you know, as a short-term measure, you're absolutely right. Face-to-face, we're a service industry. Face-to-face engagement, you know, is really, really important. But as an interim measure, I think, you know, it is about kind of supporting, I guess, gaps in you know, where labour once, you know, ruled the world.
Yeah, it's true. Can you share a project where sustainability was a primary focus, and what were the outcomes?
Okay, so oh gosh, that's a challenging one. So sustainability. So I literally had to prepare. It was one of my first projects. Okay, so it was one of TAF's first projects in our first year, so 2018. We had to pull together a directory of what the caterers were doing, what the grocery stores were doing, and what independents were doing in terms of signing up to the plastic pack wrap, the United Nations initiatives, sustainable goals. And we had to benchmark them all. So that was taking 10 contract caterers and doing this as an independent piece of research. And at the end of the day, it was so that this particular company could assess, you know, what the impacts were. So that was 5 years ago. I should really go back to them and see if they want me to do an updated one. But it was looking at everything, you know, in terms of the individual, the different areas where you could go and get food or food services, you know, whether it was a grab and go, whether it was prep on site, whether it was kind of in-house. And it was looking at all of those, from plastic bags to containers to reusable cups. And it was, it's interesting to have that insight. It's probably reminded me to go back and have a look at it and see you know, what the changes are.
Yeah, that would be really fascinating, as we've come a long way in a very short space of time over the last couple of years, for sure. I was just going to say, I've just noticed time's flying by, so I'm going to just do a couple more questions.
Okay.
So this would be around, let's have a look. Some wisdom and takeaways for the audience. So could you give and you've already touched on one or two of these, I think. So can you give the audience your top 3 recipes for success working with clients, caterers and consultants?
Okay, so I definitely have no doubt about this. It's listening, collaborating, and delivering. You've got to listen to the client. What is the client employing you to do? Listen to the caterers, understand their stories, understand their solutions, knowing what's out there, and listening to customers. Most important of all. If you don't know who you're feeding, don't be throwing what you do onto them. The second thing is collaborating, making sure you're collaborating with the right people to deliver the right solutions to your clients. If you don't have the right people in place, get them. You can reach out and get them. You can reach anyone, anywhere in the world these days with social media being as it is, and then delivering the solutions. You've got to be able to give the client what they want. So I definitely say those, and they underpin the DNA that every project I've done, it's right there in black and white.
Yeah, thank you, Tracey. Okay, a bit about some legacy now. So, what's a goal or aspiration you have for leaving a positive mark on the industry and community?
I think maybe a positive legacy would be around anyone can be a catering consultant. If you've, I've come in from the outside. I would like to think that someone who maybe is contemplating a career change might see this and think, actually, I love food. Yeah. I can go in with an independent pair of eyes, and Tracey's done it. I haven't had a natural path into this industry. And then equally, maybe women will watch this video and think, oh, maybe I could be a catering consultant, and maybe people who maybe those that have taken some time out because they want a bit more well-being. If you're thinking about being a catering consultant, go in, do your own thing. Don't be frightened. Yes, there are established people, but there's plenty of work for everybody in our industry. And if you've got a catering background, you'll probably have lots of really useful insights to present to clients out there. And I'd say, but know that you've got to graft hard. It's worth it. It's definitely worth it in the end. And I think it's all about combining experience, common sense, and just being practical and pragmatic. And it's got to be about providing relevant, reliable, and timely advice.
Yeah, that's some great insights there. Okay, so before we finish, we're just going to do a quick fire round for a little bit of fun.
Okay.
Tea or coffee? Tea or coffee?
Coffee, definitely.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird. I used to be a night owl, but I'm definitely early. Get up and run, have the smoothie, work.
Okay, so if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh my God, Peter Ustinov. I went to see him, an audience with him. He's met everyone from I think 6 different presidents. Hitler. He was such a raconteur. I think if I could speak to anyone, it would be someone like him. He was fascinating in an audience with when I saw him live, and I think,
wow. That's amazing. Okay, so for our listeners, Tracey, if they want to connect with you and learn more about TAF, how can they get hold of you?
Well, you can send me an email. Do I give my details out here? You can send me an email. You can contact me on LinkedIn. You can look at our website, which is www.tafcateringconsultancy.com. And that's about it. It's the usual methods. But if you're looking for advice, you just want, whether you're looking to come into a consultancy yourself or you're looking for a catering consultant, just my door's always open.
That's great. Tracey, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today.
And you as well. Thank you, Maxine.
For our audience, thank you for listening. And if you don't get a chance, just always, you can also see this on YouTube, and it's also streamed on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. So this has been Consultants Corner, creating better understanding and insight, changing the industry narrative. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Tracey.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Maxine.